Your daily fix of women's mixed martial arts from the UFC, Invicta FC, Bellator, and one championship. Be in the loop, because Golden State Media Concepts got you covered. Get your fix on women's MMA. We've got you covered on Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Thank you for tuning into the GSMC Women's MMA Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Arnel De Leon, and hopefully your day is going bueno. Wherever you are, whoever you are, hopefully your day is going well as we are persevering through yet another tough year. Now, here in Southern California, because I live in Southern California, I live in Los Angeles, things are slowly reopening up. I will be visiting my family in Texas because Texas, Mississippi, and one other state are currently open. Now, it's not like open in the sense that it's 100% perfectly normal like it used to be over a year ago. No, I do know that there are restaurants and there are venues that are holding 25% capacity. And that's also being applied here in Los Angeles to an extent. Next week, there will be indoor seating for restaurants, and like indoor venues will be like widely available. Now, if you do go to the Irvine area, Irvine, California, if you go there, things are pretty much normal. As if nothing happened in the past year. Like, I walked to the mall last week just to see, like, what's going on, like how active is this area. And when I went there, oh my goodness, there was lines of people going in restaurants. The mall is jam-packed, insanely huge. And although each store within the mall had a maximum capacity of like, only 7 people can go inside or only 25 people can go inside, there's a lot of people in the mall. There were a whole lot of people in the mall walking around, not doing the whole distancing thing. Some of them not even wearing face masks. And I thought, oh my goodness, Irvine, California is like going through this. And then in Los Angeles, where I currently reside, Los Angeles seems pretty normal. Yeah, we're still wearing the masks and stuff, but people are walking around, driving around. People are still hanging out like in parks, in public parks. One of my friends recently headed to Malibu, like Malibu Beach, and it's pretty packed there. People are partying, hanging out, celebrating, and ironically enough, though, my friends are currently panicking more so ever. Like, it's weird. They're the exact opposite in the sense that when this whole COVID thing started happening back in April, it's like late April, mid-April of 2020, they were still like ignoring everything, still hanging out, not following procedures. And then nowadays, to which, things are slowly like reopening up and things are going to start to normalize, they're panicking more so than ever before, which, by the way, is completely understandable. I've been impacted by COVID. I've talked about it on the podcast where I've had churchgoers, because I also work along church. I work at a church, and in that church, we have a lot of elderly people. And we had 3 of them within the span of a week and a half pass away. So I understand it. I get it. It's very, very scary. But a part of me is also kind of excited. I'm kind of excited because we can't close ourselves off to the world all the time here. I think I saw an interesting comment on Twitter where somebody mentioned like, oh, finally, we can all go back to normal. We can go leave our houses. And then right below that was a comment that had over 10,000 likes where people were saying, no. To the people who are saying that they never left their house in the span of a year, no way. And I'm pretty sure there are some people who somehow were able to keep themselves in their house or in their homes throughout an entire year, somehow are working their jobs via remote, I'm guessing. But I'm not sure how that works for a lot of jobs for the majority of Americans, especially in Los Angeles area. I don't get it. I really don't. But I am excited for the reopening of Los Angeles. Starting next week, we will have restaurants being widely available. The limitations on malls and public areas will be less restricted. So next week, Los Angeles going good. And COVID cases are dropping significantly. I think we went from like 150,000 cases to just 50,000 cases. And a lot more people are taking the vaccines, and vaccines are being readily available across California and Los Angeles It's been dropping down significantly so yay, things will get back to normal, and it's coming right around the corner because the MLB season, they'll be coming back up, and there's already talks right now that some teams will have people in attendance. Now, they're going to still have, fake people in attendance. We're still going to have mannequins. I went over to a restaurant one time, and that restaurant was doing outdoor seating, and to make it look like the restaurant was active, they had mannequins, and they had fake plastic food. So you have these mannequins that are holding plastic forks, and it's supposed to simulate them eating plastic apples and oranges. Have you ever been to an IKEA or a Walmart or to any furniture shop, and you're gonna see plastic apples, plastic plates and all that stuff? Yeah, that's what's happening in some restaurants in Los Angeles. Kind of weird. But with the MLB, they will be having maybe some fans in attendance. It's already happening for AEW, All Elite Wrestling, where there's some people of attendance. The WWE, they're working on it right now. I do know that Dana White is trying to go get a show in Texas, but there's some complications going on right now with the mayors of Texas, agreeing and disagreeing with the senators and the governors of Texas. So that's an issue there. And Sacramento Kings, a basketball team that are up in Northern California, they got fans in attendance there also. So we have some fan attendance happening already in some sporting events. One Championships, they already have people there in Singapore attending the closed events for One Championships. Bellator, unsure. PFL, we don't know about the status for their audience coming into the shows, but they definitely do have a schedule coming up in the near future. We do also have in the UFC a potential for a show happening in Texas. So in the Western area, yeah, there is a lack of fan attendance for MMA shows, but talks are happening. It could happen in MLB. There are already some games with fans already for NBA basketball, for the AEW show. WrestleMania's around the corner, and they're selling tickets for WrestleMania somehow. Strange, very strange. But it also makes me optimistic. It makes me optimistic for the future of sports, as sports is becoming yet again normalized. And so with that being said, with the normalization of sports, there's one specific division that should be normal, but it's not. And it's the obvious, pink elephant in the room division. And that division is the UFC Women's Featherweight division. And when I say it's a black sheep, or the pink elephant in the room, kind of both, is the fact that the UFC, the way how it presents its shows, is supposed to be the best fighters in the world. And to an extent, they're right. It's true. They have some of the best talents out there in the world. Some can argue that they have the best roster, best mixed martial arts roster in the entire world. Better than One Championships, easily better than Bellator. So what's wrong with the UFC Women's Featherweight division? Well, first off, there is no featherweight division. And you're asking yourself, okay, how could there be no featherweight division? Because there is a lack of fighters in the featherweight division. If you go on UFC.com, you will find top 10 rankings, top 15 rankings for every single division in the company. All of them. Women's bantamweight, men's middleweight, women's strawweight, men's flyweight. There are rankings for these divisions. Heck, flyweight and bantamweight for the longest time went through a period of struggling and trying to come up with fighters to be even part of the rankings in the first place. A big reason as to Demetrius Johnson having a long title reign and why there are so many question marks in that division was the fact that the rankings really didn't matter at all in the men's fight division. It just didn't. And the same thing could be applied, except even worse, for the women's featherweight division, because there's no rankings in the women's featherweight division. When you go look at the women's featherweight division, you think of two fighters. Technically three. Amanda Nunes, the women's flyweight champion, Felicia Spencer, and Megan Anderson. Now, Felicia Spencer, she will be fighting against a new fighter coming in May. But other than that, though, what's happening in the women's flyweight division? There was an Ultimate Fighter season that was focused around building that featherweight division, but all the competitors in that in the Ultimate Fighter series, ended up moving themselves from flyweight over to bantamweight. And we've heard in the past where Dana White's talking about that he wants to go focus, dial it in on the women's bantamweight division being the division that can go and be competitive against Amanda Nunes. Well, what about the featherweights? Because the women's feather division is, without a doubt, and has been unanimously agreed upon, for being the weakest division in all of the UFC. Second weakest division, the women's flyweight division. And for me, that's very upsetting. It really is. Because the women's flyweight division came with a whole lot of fanfare. The featherweight division was initially built around Chris Cyborg. The basis as to why the featherweight division even exists for the woman was because of Chris Cyborg. That we were going to see Amanda Nunes, she's the dominant champion of the bantamweights. Cyborg, the dominant champion of the featherweights. And when Cyborg came in, there were talks going around like, oh wow, Chris Cyborg, she's going to have a long, dominant title reign in the UFC. But then they pulled the trigger way too soon, way too quick. We had champion versus champion, Cyborg being the champion for the feather division that had little to no history behind it, because she came in, became the inaugural feather champion, and then it became champion versus champion when matched up with Nunes. There was no lineage. There's a history for the women's feather division. So why should we care? Why? And once again, this is not me disrespecting the women who do compete at that women's feather division. No disrespect coming from me to them. What I'm saying is, why would a fighter from the women's feather division want to stay there? Now, there are reasons as to why, but it doesn't look good. And consider the fact that Amanda Nunes, she's the double champion, and she defended her belt, the featherweight belt, twice. Her last two bouts were against Spencer and Megan Anderson. And by doing so, she did not defend the women's bantamweight title for over a year. Now you think to yourself, okay, you're a double champion, you get double the fights, right? Double the responsibilities? Well, not really. Because Amanda Nunes, she's one of those fighters who is very nitpicky and picking and choosing on what date she wants to go fight in, which is understandable. She is the GOAT. She's the greatest women's fighter in mixed martial arts, arguably history. Considering her pedigree, considering her accomplishments, I get it. But with her having two belts, and I've said this in the past for other fighters, in the sense that if you have two belts, well, that doesn't mean you're going to fight twice as often. It doesn't mean that you're going to go defend the belts, more so than ever. Because if you were the champion, you typically defend your belt once, maybe twice in a year. If you hold two belts, then in theory, you should be able to defend the belt 4 times, right? In theory. Because you are the head of the pack for 2 divisions instead of 1. Which means you get double responsibilities, double the matchups, double the fights, right? Well, no, not really. That's not how it works for Amanda Nunes. And with her beating Spencer and her beating Megan Anderson in dominant fashions, we're now questioning whether or not the women's featherweight division will still be around. There are different takes coming in left and right. There's one report going on that Amanda Nunes said that she'd be fine if the women's featherweight division were to be, stopped, like get rid of. There are talks going around on that there should be a women's animate division that I definitely agree with. I would rather have a women's animate division over a women's featherweight division. And immediately after Nunes' bout against Megan Anderson, she says that, you know what? I can fight at 145. I feel really good. I don't mind fighting at 145 at all. I don't mind, keeping the division going. Definitely. And obviously, Amanda Nunes, there's nobody that she sees in the featherweight division, whether it be prospects or Felicia Spencer, who can be a real competition for her. Megan Anderson, she came into the UFC with a whole lot of hype, former Invicta champion, and when they're talking about Megan Anderson, the commentary team, like people online who are giving analytics and trying to give their perspective and their viewpoints as to why they believe Megan Anderson can pose as a true threat against Amanda Nunes. Yeah, there's a lot of, hype behind her. But sadly, Megan Anderson, she is one of those fighters who you look at and you're like, oh my goodness, she has a lot of potential. But can she put it all together to become a world champion? I'm not sure. Megan Anderson has a whole lot of question marks going down the line in her career, considering that she is no longer a member of the UFC roster, which is pretty shocking. But what is the future of Megan Anderson? What is the future for the women's featherweight division? Well, after a short break, I'll be discussing the UFC 259 co-main event of Megan Anderson versus Mariana Nunes for the UFC women's featherweight title. See you soon.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info. Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines, they got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
And we are back. And so I'm discussing UFC 259. What is the future for Megan Anderson, the UFC Women's Featherweight Division, and Mariana Nunes? Well, in the bout between Mariana Nunes and Megan Anderson, which was the co-main event for UFC 259. Going to this bout here, the expectation was, alright, Mariana Nunes, she's going to win this. It was the throwaway bout. When I was watching UFC 259, me and my friends, we're all hyped, we're all excited. Actually, this came in after the Peter Yan Aljamain Sterling bout. We were excited for the card, but this is the one fight we thought to ourselves, alright, Nunes, Anderson, this is the throwaway fight. Because everybody knew what the ending was, to an extent. But we know that Amanda Nunes is going to win the bout. That's what we knew. When I was making my predictions, I thought Amanda Nunes is going to go shoot in for a takedown, do some clinch work, and slowly work on her in 5 rounds of action. Because if you look at Amanda Nunes in her performances against GR, Jermaine Duraname, and Fisher Spencer, it's obvious that she has taken a huge focus onto grappling and wrestling, into ground control, into stand-up. That is an aspect of Mariana's game that she is focusing on. And it was showcased here in her bout against Anderson, as Mariana was able to defeat Megan Anderson via submission with a triangle armbar in about 2 minutes. It was that dominant of a performance by Nunes. Now go throw up the fight stats here. My boss asked me, man, what did Megan Anderson do? Did she even land one punch? And she did. Nunes landed 19 of 26 total strikes. 19 of 26. 18 of those were significant strikes. Megan Anderson landed 2 of 5 strikes, which are also her 2 of 5 significant strikes. Anderson landed 2 strikes in grand total in the biggest fight of her entire career. And those 2 strikes, it's not like a Derek Lewis situation where any single punch from Lewis is a knockout punch. And yeah, people were really hyped on it when Megan Anderson did it on Norma Dumont. But Norma Dumont versus Amanda Nunes, those are 2 fighters of very different levels. Norma Dumont, she's a really good fighter, but Amanda Nunes, she's the greatest of all time. She's the GOAT of all of women's mixed martial arts. So I want to get no respect to Norma Dumont, but it's hard to see someone like Megan Anderson replicate her performance against Dermont or Dos Santos against someone like Nunes. So the bell rings, and Megan Anderson came in as the plus, like near 1,200 favorites. Like, it was pretty equivalent to the Amanda Nunes versus Ronda Rousey fights, or the Holm versus Ronda Rousey fights, where for some reason the fighter who ended up losing came in as the huge mega favorite. Not sure why that was, but it was. But unlike those other fights, Amanda Nunes here, she came in as the overwhelming favorite, and she steamrolled her opponent in Anderson. Now, the bell sounded, both fighters met up in the middle, and one thing I love about Amanda Nunes is that she does not do the poking game. She doesn't. It's either she overcommits in the striking, or she overcommits herself in the grappling. There's never a phase where she's going in there and is poking her opponent out, and then after a round or two, then they download the information in their brain, and then the action really picks up. We see that a lot. It specifically happens a whole lot in the smaller divisions, in featherweight and at strawweight. But for Nunes, whether it be bantamweight or featherweight, she has no fear going over 100% in any bout she goes into and putting full throttle in the beginning of the fight. Now, yes, Amanda Nunes, she will slow the pace down, as shown in all her fights. She slows the pace down if she does end up getting to the third round. But in this scenario here, this fight ends up going as far as 2 minutes and 3 seconds in the first round. So Amanda Nunes, she is just hitting Megan Anderson with these clean bomb shots to the face, man. Amanda Nunes not throwing any leg kicks, no body kicks. She just becomes a pure headhunter. And Megan Anderson, she's not moving her head that much. Actually, she looked very stiff. Not only does she look very stiff, the way how my friend described Megan Anderson, he described Megan Anderson as somebody who looked like that they were shocked to be there, that they were surprised to be there in the first place. And you know what? You can freeze it, actually. You can freeze and have still images of Megan Anderson where the second she takes one punch from Nunes, she's like, whoa, this girl's the real deal. Like, this girl here, I don't know. Like, you can kind of tell by the face and the facial language of some certain fighters of when they are mentally checked out. It looked like Megan Anderson was checked out. Because Megan Anderson, she got strong one-punch knockout power. But yet, in her bout against Nunes, the second that she got rocked, she became very shaky in her movement. It didn't look controlled. It looked very stiff. Her head wasn't moving all that much. Her footwork was pretty much non-existent. It was Amanda Nunes picking apart this girl here. Bell sounds, they both meet up. Amanda Nunes picks her apart. She gets a knockdown on Anderson, goes in, starts doing some ground pound action on Megan Anderson, and I thought to myself, oh my goodness, Megan Anderson, this is your time to show off your jiu-jitsu. Because Megan Anderson, based off the training kit videos she gives off, she says that she's working on her jiu-jitsu and thinks it's going to be a huge factor into her winning and defeating Amanda Nunes. But we didn't see that. The second she's on the ground, Nunes gets on mount position, gets a triangle choke in, and wins. So, what could Megan Anderson do better in that fight? I'm not really sure. Because the second she got rocked, she looked obviously shooked. And then when she gets shooked, she just checked out for the rest of the fight. She didn't do well in the stand-up. She didn't do well on the ground. And one issue with Megan Anderson, and it is very evident in every bout she's been in for the UFC, whether it be for Dos Santos, whether it be for Norma Dormont, Felicia Spencer, Holly Holm, Megan Anderson, despite the fact that she's either at or slightly above 6 foot tall, she's huge, she's got insane reach advantage. There's no other fighter in the entire UFC women's roster that has the reach or size advantage that someone like Megan Anderson does. No one. And so that's why there was a lot of hype going in for Anderson, in the sense that she has a physical advantage that nobody else, that no woman in the UFC can replicate. None of them. You can't teach size. So for Anderson, in all her bouts, despite the fact she's kind of like Macy Barber. Like, she's very similar to Macy Barber. You know, coming in, world champ, high expectations to become like a world beater, great potential, high ceiling. You look at all the training camps, you're like, oh my goodness, wow, this girl has it. Now, can she put it all together and win for a title? That was the biggest question. And both Macy Barber and Miggy Anderson, despite their physical, it's weird because they're bigger than their opponents. They're obviously physically more dominant, and it's been talked about by the commentator team, by analysts, that, oh man, Macy Barber and Miggy Anderson, these two women are physically strong, physically dominant. They look great in their division. Like, Miggy Anderson looks like she would naturally fight at 155 pounds. She really does. But it's just not working. It's just not. And so with Nunes successfully defending her women's featherweight belt, I am saying right now, we're not going to see that belt be defended again anytime soon. There is a name, someone's name being thrown out there as being a possible contender for Nunes. And that's Kayla Harrison. If there is anybody right now who can compete in the women's featherweight division and defeat Nunes, it would have to be Kayla Harrison. Now, obviously, the weight cut would be difficult on Kayla Harrison, but Kayla Harrison is one of those fighters who is extremely dominant in clinch, really good wrestler. Her kickboxing skills are very underrated, and it really is the exact opposite of Miggy Anderson, where Miggy Anderson, the tools are there, but she can't put it together. And then you have Kayla Harrison, which the tools are there, and you have seen it. There's evidence out there that proves and shows that Kayla Harrison, she can go in and dominate any opponent, any woman she sees, and is right across from her. That's how strong of a fighter that she is. And the thing, though, with Kayla Harrison is that there's no way Amanda Nunes can get away doing certain things against someone like Kayla Harrison. Because for Miggy Anderson, she's very susceptible to takedowns and clinching. Like, it feels like at times, because in every single bout she's been in the UFC, within the span of a minute and 30 seconds, she gets clinched, then she tries to get out of it, and then she gets taken down, and this scenario gets Nunes, where she gets rocked, gets clinched, gets taken down. So, Miggy Anderson, yes, her grappling is a huge, huge question mark, and for someone like Kayla Harrison, I don't think the grappling aspect of the fight game is going to be that much. Now, will Kayla Harrison fight Amanda Nunes anytime soon? Obviously not, because the contract for Kayla Harrison is 1 year. And on top of that, Kayla Harrison, after finishing up her, which is a season that a lot of us believe is her last one, once she accomplishes her goal of completing her contract for PFL, I can see her signing with the UFC or potentially signing with Bellator. She can either choose to go on the path of defeating Nunes or on the path of defeating Cyborg. I think the path for Cyborg will be a lot more easier for Kayla Harrison. But for Kayla Harrison coming to the UFC, it's going to take maybe a year, maybe possibly 2 years, because after her PFL contract is done, she'll then go out there and she's going to think about, like, okay, which organization, which MMA organization wants me or is best for me. And there's also this thing going on in her contract where if you compete with PFL, you can't compete anywhere else for several months. So a year to 2 years, possibly around a year and a half, is going to be the issue. Also, with Amanda Nunes, she almost never fights anybody without like a long period of prep time. It's almost just never happens for Nunes. No matter how difficult the opponent is, she's like, nah, I need like 5 months or 6 months to prepare for this one opponent. And you know what? It's been working for Nunes, but I'll like to see a lot more activity from someone who has 2 belts, who is a double champion. That's all I'm saying here. And so with Amanda Nunes, she'll be going back at bantamweight. She's thinking Jermaine Randomay. There's also a call out from Juliana Pena, and for as much as I love Juliana Pena, I think Pena is maybe one fight away from finally getting a title fight she's been like waiting for and she's been calling out for. But as she's going to bantamweight, what's going on with the women's featherweight division? Well, Miggy Anderson is no longer under contract following her loss at UFC 259. This article is from MSN.com, written by John Morgan. Despite challenging for the UFC Women's Featherweight title at this past weekend's UFC 259 events, Miggy Anderson is no longer under contract with the UFC promotion. MMA Junkie confirmed with Anderson's management team at Paradigm Sports that she competed at UFC 259 in the final fight of her deal, and has not fulfilled her obligations with the promotion. MMA Fighting first reported Anderson's contract status. While Anderson is 11-5 in her MMA career, she is 3-3 in her UFC career. She is free to sign with any new agreement with any new promotion that is offering her something. She is a former Invicta FC Fighter champion, co-main event fighter. So yeah, she's got a lot of stock in her. Megan Anderson proceeds to go do an interview, and in an interview she talked about her, leaving the UFC. It doesn't seem like there's going to be another contract being given out. The women's fight division, according to Mariana Moraes, says that she is perfectly fine competing at 145 still, even though the division is cleaned out. Dana White says that as long as Nunes is perfectly fine competing at 145, then she can keep the belt, and the division will go around. Now, Megan Anderson on Twitch in her interview does say that the UFC will tear down the UFC women's featherweight division, which is understandable. Now, I get why the UFC would tear apart the women's featherweight division, because it's a weak division. It's inactive because the women's champion is the champion of two divisions, and there's only so much she can go fight in a year-by-year basis. Now, although the women's featherweight division is not officially closed, at this point here, it's an afterthought. It is an afterthought division. She will be going at bantamweight. There are a lot more fun and better matchups she can do at the women's bantamweight division. So it leaves excitement for that division as she's coming back to that, but it leaves us pretty much empty for the featherweights. I think the women's featherweight division, I believe within the span of a year, it's officially going to be torn apart, that we're going to see a women's bantamweight division, because if Dana White really is focused and dialed in and having the best women compete at bantamweights, well, there's no reason for there to be a women's featherweight division at all in the first place, is there? You're listening to the GSMC Women's MMA Podcast, coming back after a short break here. See you soon.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play. This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA, to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
And we're back. And so, continuing the news brief here, Zhang Weili opens as a clear betting favorite over Rose Namajunas ahead of UFC 261 strawweight title fight. So it is coming in from best fight odds for UFC 261. Rose Namajunas is plus 170 underdog, Zhang Weili minus 200 favorites. Makes sense. It definitely does. Because for Zhang Weili and Rose Namajunas, you're looking at this matchup here, and you're only as good as your last fights. And me, along with a whole lot of people, were still taken away from Zhang Weili versus Weili Zhang. That fight is one of the greatest fights ever in UFC history, and that fight alone will pretty much get Zhang Weili into the Hall of Fame. Yeah, it's that good of a fight. And there so far have been no kinks in the armor of Zhang Weili, other than the fact that Weili Zhang has proven that you can, if possible, outperform Zhang Weili in terms of striking volume. You can do that. It's just that the problem, though, is that Zhang Weili, she is a walking tank. She is. Zhang Weili was struck in the face so often in her fight against Weili Zhang and was tagged a lot by a lot of jabs coming in from Weili Zhang, but yet still kept moving the pace forward, which is insane. I've never seen a woman who got tagged in the face that much, got hit that much, and yet for some reason is still moving forward and consistently fighting at a high pace. Like Weili Zhang versus most women, the majority of girls, nobody can keep pace with Weili Zhang. It was an incredibly close bout, and me and a lot of people can agree. Yeah, Zhang Weili, this girl, oh my goodness, not only will she provide exciting matches, but she can match toe-to-toe with anybody. The fact that she was able to knock out Jessica Andrade is just spectacular. Nobody dominated Jessica Andrade like Zhang Weili has. And because of that, when you compare Rose Namajunas, when she fought against Jessica Andrade, you're looking how both of them handled her in their respective bouts. You're looking how both of them handled Weili Zhang. So for Rose Namajunas, she's definitely that type of fighter who is more of a pointless fighter. Her boxing is better than Jessica Andrade, better than Weili Zhang. And so you're thinking right now that the only way Rose Namajunas will be able to defeat Zhang Weili is after 5 rounds of action. And after 5 rounds of action, Rose Namajunas, her footwork, her speed, she'll be able to go and outstrike Zhang Weili. And that's my prediction. I'm going to say it now. Rose Namajunas will land more total strikes than Zhang Weili. But will that be enough for Rose Namajunas to win the bout? I'm not really sure, because Weili Zhang, she landed more strikes than Zhang Weili in every single round in her bouts against her. But she ended up losing, and I'm a firm believer that if you were to replay the fight between Weili Zhang and Zhang Weili over 100 times, there's a real possibility that Weili Zhang could have won a handful of them. If you just replace the judges, yeah, there's a possibility that Weili Zhang could have walked away and defeated Zhang Weili and become a 2-time women's strawweight champion. Now, we're not sure what the future is for Weili Zhang on when she is coming back. And for Rose Namajunas, yes, Rose Namajunas was able to outstrike Weili Zhang. And so I wouldn't be surprised if Rose Namajunas is able to match or outdo the pace that Weili Zhang was able to do so in her fight against Zhang Weili. Now, the Jessica Andrade fight, that's where a lot of people are questioning if Rose Namajunas has what it takes to defeat Zhang Weili. Because in her bout against Jessica Andrade, in the second bout, the rematch, Rose, her footwork in boxing was spectacular in the first 2 rounds. But then it was in the third round that Rose Namajunas started to fall apart, and that she was getting tagged over and over again by Jessica Andrade. And one could argue that if that fight were to go for 5 rounds, if that was a championship fight, first, second round goes to Rose Namajunas, third, fourth, and fifth round goes towards Jessica Andrade. That was a very likely scenario to happen if the rematch was a championship fight. Now, looking into the fight against Zhang Weili, not only does she hit harder than Jessica Andrade, she's able to keep pace and be as consistent or strike as much of a high volume as Weili Zhang. And because of that, when you look at Rose Namajunas and Zhang Weili, you could be like, alright then, Rose might win in this category, but even though she's winning this category, it's not going to secure the victory, and there's a real possibility of her getting knocked out. If you were to say, who is most likely to get knocked out? You would say Rose. You would say Rose Namajunas is the one who is most likely to get knocked out and be tagged in the face and get dropped on the floor by Zhang Weili. Zhang Weili, it's been shown that she is incredibly tough. Her durability and endurance is absolutely insane. And the fact that she can go take a shot from Andrade to be able to take as much shots as she has from Weili Zhang shows that this girl is pretty much a walking tank. She is that strong, that durable. Also, one has to question the mental health of Rose Namajunas. We've seen it. Rose Namajunas, although recently she did say that she is invigorated, she's reinvigorated in her career in the UFC, I'm getting different takes here from the Namajunas camp, from the Dana White camp. Dana White has said that the reason why Carlos Esparza, who by the way is competing in the same card against Yan Shannon, A huge reason as to why that is even happening in the first place is because Dana White is second-guessing, Dana White and the UFC brass are second-guessing Rose Namajunas' mental health and whether or not she is committed to fighting against Zhang Weili. Because it was going to be Zhang Weili versus Rose Namajunas a year ago, but Rose declined, and then we had Joanna Jędrzejczyk against Zhang Weili. And even then, we're constantly hearing reports, at least from Dana White's side, being like, alright, I'm not really sure what's going on with Joanna Jędrzejczyk. She may or may not be, ready to fight against Zhang Weili mentally. So hopefully she is healthy in her bout against her. So I'm excited for the matchup. This could be a fight of the year contender. I believe this fight can be as good, if not better, than the Weili and Jędrzejczyk fights. But we just have to cross our fingers and hope that this fight will be able to happen. And hopefully things go perfectly well. We're going to see the best version of these two women. Rose Namajunas is one of the best boxers I've ever seen to ever step inside the octagon. Her footwork, I'm going to argue right now, is actually better than Max Holloway. Yes, I firmly believe that Rose Namajunas is one of the best boxers in all the UFC. Without a doubt, her footwork is among the very elite. It is as good, if not better, than Max Holloway. Rose Namajunas is that good of a boxer, and I am not surprised that she is the underdog going to her bouts against Zhang Weili, but I believe Zhang Weili will win the bout and defeat Rose Namajunas to retain her women's UFC strawweight title because of a combination of her durability and be able to keep a consistent pace through all 5 rounds of action, and she can match toe-to-toe in Rose Namajunas in the boxing. So, Rose Namajunas, for as good of a boxer as she is, she might land more strikes than Zhang Weili. I don't think she'd be able to do so in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th rounds. Now, she was able to do so in her championship bouts against Joanna Jędrzejczyk, but she wasn't able to do that in her last bout against Jessica Andrade. You're only as good as your last fight. So I'm picking Zhang Weili to defeat Rose Namajunas. But expect that bout to be an absolutely spectacular match. It's coming up at UFC 261, just 2 months away. And so we are getting a plethora of new matchups coming up, as we have undefeated Kana Watanabe set to fight against Alejandra Lara at Bellator 255 on April 2nd. Watanabe, who has an MMA career of having 9 wins, 0 losses, and 1 draw, will be fighting for the first time since December of 2019, when she picked up a 3rd-round TKO win over Lara at Bellator 237. The 30-year-old has previously competed for Ryzen and at Deep Jewels, winning 6 of her 9 career wins by way of stoppages. Lara, on the other hand, she is 9 wins, 3 losses, 0 draw, coming off an impressive 2-fight win streak after picking up victories over Vera Ortega and Taylor Turner. The 26-year-old has been fighting for Bellator MMA since 2017 and notably challenged against Lima McFarlane for the flyweight championship back in 2018, losing by way of 3rd-round armbar submission. That was about 3 years ago, and I can guarantee right now her fighting abilities has improved tremendously. Lima McFarlane, although she has been a great champion, her last championship outing wasn't exactly the best fighting or best showing out there. So hopefully Lima McFarlane, she's definitely one fighter to look out for the year of 2021 to be a bounce back year for her. And we have one of my personal favorites in Roxanne Modafferi versus Talia Santos set for UFC Fight Night on May 8th. As first reported by Combate, Roxanne Modafferi will fight against... I'm looking at the thumbnail right now for this reported news here, and it's her with the Dragon Ball Goku Super Saiyan hair. She's wearing this wig. It's like the pointy, ridiculous looking wig. She's yelling, and then there's a second thumbnail image of her where she's doing the Spock V thing with her hands. So... Roxanne Modafferi, she's definitely a fan favorite. I will never forget a comment that was put out for her, I found on YouTube, when there was an interview happening. She was doing an interview for ESPN, and somebody in the comment section said that Roxanne Modafferi is essentially your super nice, chill librarian at school who just so happens to go and kick your butt. That's not Roxanne Modafferi. So Modafferi, she is 25-18 in her MMA career, will be looking to rebound from a unanimous decision loss to Viviane Araújo at a UFC Fight Night event this past January. The 30-year-old has picked up a number of notable victories since her latest run in the UFC, including over Andrea Lee, Macy Barber, Antonina Shevchenko, and Bob Hunchak. Also known as the Happy Warrior, Modafferi is a veteran of the sport who has been competing since 2002. Meanwhile, her opponent, Talia Santos is 17-1 in her MMA career, looks to build off an impressive 2-fight win streak following decision victories over Jillian Robertson and Molly Buchanan. The 27-year-old has finished 10 of her last 17 opponents via stoppages, with her sole loss coming off her UFC debut against Mariana Moraes back in February 2019. UFC Fight Night 191 will take place on May 8, 2021. The location will probably take place in the UFC Apex facility building. Who do I think will win that one? I am always going to cheer and support Roxanne Modafferi. I always will. Talia Santos, her kickboxing skills are out of this world. Much more better than Roxanne Modafferi. Now, for Modafferi, she's definitely one of those fighters who you don't know where you're going to get from. At one moment, she's like expert, high-level kickboxer, and next thing you know, now she's like a grappler. Like, Modafferi perfectly exemplifies the all-around MMA fighter who isn't exactly S tier in any specific category, but like out of a blue, she can go and become that. Like, she's gonna go Ultra Instinct and essentially go full-on S tier in a specific category and just stomp her opponents. For instance, so Maycee Barber and Anthony Shevchenko, whatever your opinion is on those two women, you can say like, oh well, those two women have been underwhelming, that those two women came in with a whole lot of hype, and the expectations for them was that they're like high-level strikers who are insanely powerful and strong, who are very quick. Well, Modafferi was able to stop them, and in hindsight, we now know that those two women right now are pretty much underperforming. Anthony Shevchenko, she's getting a bounce back right now. She started off in her UFC career really struggling, and now she's doing well for herself, now developing that all-around MMA game. She can now grapple, which is a huge plus for her, considering the fact that her opponents were taking advantage of her lack of grappling abilities. And yes, Maycee Barber and Anthony Shevchenko, they were thrown to the wolves immediately in the women's fight division. They came in as unranked fighters, and next thing you know, they're competing against top 5 fighters. So yeah, they came with a whole lot of expectations, and they were thrown to the wolves way too early in their runs in the UFC. But Roxanne Modafferi, at the time that she defeated both Barber and Anthony Shevchenko, she came in as a heavy underdog. Heavy underdog. And if you were to have an argument or debate with somebody with Modafferi defeating those two women, you'd be like, you'd be seen as like, you kidding me? No, it's not going to happen. The librarian-looking chick, she's going to defeat those two fighters? No, man, it's not going to happen. And guess what? She proves them wrong. Talia Santos, in theory and objectively, in terms of the striking category, kickboxing-wise, without a doubt, Talia Santos, she defeats Modafferi. Now, the grappling, you have to go be in favor of Modafferi, and I'm pretty sure Santos will work on that aspect of the fight game during training camp. We're not exactly sure on what version of Modafferi we're going to get. Are we going to see world beater top 5 fighter Modafferi, or are we going to see journeyman fighter Modafferi? Either way, I am picking Talia Santos to win, but I will be cheering for Roxanne Modafferi to go win. You're listening to the GSMC Women's MMA Podcast. Coming back after a short break, continuing on with the news brief.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red-hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's gsmcpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
And we're back. And so this is coming in right now from SBNation.com. Dana White's announcement says UFC fighters now at the level of NBA, NFL, and MLB. That's the headline. UFC keeps growing, and White is teasing yet other announcements coming up. This is being written by Anton Tabuena, and the UFC's highly lucrative business keeps growing. After 2020, Dana White boasted to have blew past all their financial records. The promotion recently announced a DraftKings deal reportedly worth $350 million. Although specific details have yet to be revealed, the promotion also has an upcoming outfitting deal with Venom. Now the UFC president is teasing further groundbreaking announcements and claiming that the company and the fighters are now among the massive major sports leagues. We'll have announcements this year that will take the sport and the brand to a whole new level. Dana White told BT Sports, continues to go say, every year we continue to climb. The DraftKings deal is massive. For us to be now looked at as the other big sports, the NBA, NFL, Major League Baseball, that has always been important for me. For these athletes to be respected and at the level these other athletes are at, we're finally there. We're there now. We're going to capitalize on this and grow on that around the world. In these other countries, it's basically soccer and cricket that we have to measure up to. We're getting there. So, after generating somewhat around $1 billion in the year of 2020, which is insane considering COVID happened, with the DraftKings deal is also set to add yet another guaranteed $70 million a year for the MMA leader. $70 million a year. So with that being said, do I completely agree with Dana White that he's in the same boat as NBA, NFL, MLB? No. But with more money coming in, and it's been proven statistically actually that there has been an increased rates of fighter pay. Now, the problem though is that the rate of pay relative to other sport organizations isn't all that much. UFC fighters are still scraping by, even like in the mid and upper card, at six figures. Like they're even like top fighters or like top champions who are just making at $1 million. Compare that to, an NBA player, where a player who nobody really knows all that much, who is still beginning his NBA career, can make somewhere of upwards of like $2 million a year. So imagine that. A nobody in the NBA, I'm not going to say nobody, sounds really mean, but really like a low tier player in the NBA could make $2 million. There are even players out there who make upwards of $15 million. There's a player named Nicholas Batum who played really like decent, mediocre level and was able to bank in $14.6 million per year over the course of 5 years, which amounted to like 15 times 5. He was making upwards of $75 million, and that's not including advertisements, that's not including bonuses. So he was making $75 million per year over the course of 5 years, playing at a mediocre, decent level. Can you imagine if that ever happened in the UFC, where the number 9th or 8th ranked fighter in your division is somewhat making $15 million over the course of 5 years? Imagine it. Can you imagine somebody who's like number 12th rank making bare minimum $3 million a year? Because that's how it is for the NBA, where we have players who are making just at $2.6 million, which apparently is the average now for the NBA. It's proven that the average salary for a low-level player who is coming in as like the last-minute replacement or last-minute spots for your team is making $2.6 million. To be the most least important guy in your team, $2.6 million. Now for the UFC, with money coming in, I gotta give the 2 thumbs up there that they secured the deal. I'm hoping more fighters are able to go and get secured pay. I want to see that. I want to see a lot, because we are getting a new influx of fighters coming in from the Dana White Contender Series, and Big John McCarthy, he's talked about this, where they're giving 6-figure contracts out to fighters who win the Ultimate Fighter show. 6-figure contract, to us that's big, but to everyone else it's chump change. That's chump change money. In the NBA, there was a player who declined I think it was a 4-year, $60 million deal. He declined $60 million because for him, he was being lowballed. $60 million over 4 years. Meanwhile, we make a big deal. It's like, oh wow, this fighter is going to be getting a 6-figure contract. Whoa! Strange. Or even if it is like a 7-fight contract. 7 fights. Like you still have to go through like multiple years of trying to go and attain and finish up your contract to go get that 7-year, to go get $1 million. So yeah, a lot of fighters have to go through this huge hurdle, multiple hurdles, in order to go and secure as much money as the worst player on an NBA team. And the same thing also applies for both the NFL. So let's hope that fighters like Kay Hansen, once their contract is over, because she just recently signed a contract from the Dana White Contender Series. She's right now currently UFC. She's a young prospect Hopefully, after her contract ends, then she can go and re-sign and get a much more better deal, a way better deal than what she's having right now. I'm pretty darn sure she's not making that much at a per fight basis right now for the UFC, but, with money inflation coming up, with new deals coming in, and with fighters having a lot more agency, although somebody like Megan Anderson, she's no longer with the UFC anymore, she can go and sign elsewhere. She can go sign with Bellator, she can go sign with PFL. Like, there are other options for fighters to go to. It used to be a thing that, oh man, UFC, that's the organization you have to be in order to go and make yourself a whole lot of money and make a career for yourself. Well, Megan Anderson, she was in the UFC, she made her money, she was able to up her name, her value, her stock has risen from her time in the UFC, but now she can go off and she can do whatever she wants. She can make a lot more money because apparently there are a lot of fighters now who are leaving the UFC and are reported to be making more money not working for the UFC anymore. So, yeah, it's not the end-all be-all for a fighter to go and be cut from the UFC or to move away from the UFC, though it is nice to know that the organization is making money, which means that the fighters should be making more money as time goes on. I like to live in a world where the UFC is in the same league or in the same boat as the NBA, NFL, and MLB in terms of money revenue coming in. If that's the case, then these fighters will get paid for risking their lives inside the cage. Fighters deserve more money. That's all I gotta say. They deserve more money for everything they have to go through for the profession. I talked about in a recent podcast that mental and physical health for a fighter should be the priority over just going in and fighting so they can get paychecked. And for Holly Holm, she has pulled out of her fight against Juliana Pena. I'm reading this right now from WMARankings.com. You should definitely subscribe. Holly Holm reveals kidney issues forced her out of Juliana Pena bout, expects a quick recovery. So former bantamweight champion Holly Holm has taken to Instagram to explain why her bout in May 8th against Juliana Pena is off. On Saturday, Pena called for a bantamweight title shot against Amanda Nunes after announcing that Holly Holm was injured and was pulled out of their fight. So what's going on with Holly Holm? Well, apparently Holly Holm, she goes and say on her Instagram that after going to urgent care following a severe abdominal pain, she reveals that she was diagnosed with hydronephrosis, a condition characterized by excess fluid in a kidney due to a backup of urine. Holly Holm will require a surgery to permanently fix the condition, however, does not expect to be out of action for too long. Fortunately, the recovery time is 4 to 6 weeks, and she says she is doing fine. So, Holly Holm, she is out for at least a month or two. We can expect her back within 3 months. So around June, July time is where we can go see Holly Holm. So by June, she should have training camp and her recovering from her surgery. Juliana Pena, though, I gotta respect this girl. If there's anybody right now who's hustling in the women's divisions to go put themselves in a really high position, it's Juliana Pena. This girl, she's, ever since her last bout, she's been incredibly vocal on Twitter specifically, calling out Amanda Nunes pretty much every day. She's calling her out. She's calling her like a chicken. She's saying that she's the real one. She's the hardest worker in the UFC. And everyone is clowning on her, dude. Every single day, she's being clowned on online, on social media. Amanda Nunes, she's like, I don't even know you. You have to respect this girl for hustling, for putting her name out there. I would love to see Pena versus Nunes, primarily just so I can see the trash talk, because Juliana Pena right now is in a whole other level in terms of trying to raise her stock and just being just going out there and promoting herself. And because of that, it's a matchup that I'm excited for, just primarily because of the build-up. Now, of course, I expect Nunes to win, and I don't think Pena should overtake Germaine de Randamie in terms of being the number one contender. I think it should be GDR, then Nunes, or if Nunes is unavailable because she has a tendency of being unavailable for a period of time after she fights, we might see Germaine de Randamie against Pena, and that's a matchup I definitely would love to watch. Another matchup that has been announced has been Virna Jandiroba versus Kanako Murata, set for UFC Fight Night on June 19. As first reported by Combate, a strawweight contest between Virna Jandiroba and Kanako Murata has been set for an upcoming UFC Fight Night event coming up in June 19. Janaraba, who is 16-2 in her MMA career, will be looking to rebound from a unanimous decision loss to Mackenzie Dern at the UFC 256 event this past December. Verna Janaraba is a former Invicta FC strawweight champion and has notable wins over Mallory Martin and Face Herrig. Now her opponent, Miranda, she is 12-1 in her MMA career, also a former Invicta FC strawweight champion, will be looking to build off an impressive promotional debut this past November when she picked up a unanimous decision victory over Randa Marcos. The 27-year-old has previously fought for a number of notable organizations, including Ryzen, KOTC, Pancras, and Deep. She owns notable wins over Angela Magana, Kabatara, and Lakana Green. UFC Fight Night 194 will take place on June 19, 2021, and will take place, potentially, at the UFC Apex Facility Building. Clarissa Shields and Maria-Eve Decaire make way for Friday's all-woman boxing pay-per-view event. Clarissa Shields and Marie-Eve Decaire have successfully made way for their headlining bout at this Friday's historic all-women's boxing pay-per-view event. Reigning WBC and WBO light middleweight champion Clarissa Shields and reigning IBF, WBA, and ring light middleweight champion Marie Decaire-Eve are set to be the headline main events. They will put all their titles on the line in a winner-takes-all match in this Friday's main event. A lot is at stake, with both women currently undefeated. Clarissa Shields is perfect with her 10-0 record, while Decaire remains undefeated at 17-0. So, all these... the thumbnail here has Clarissa Shields holding 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and her manager in the back, 6. So that's 6 belts in grand total she's holding. There are so many belts in boxing. It is ridiculous. And by the end of this, one of these women will be holding 10 belts. Yikes. Clarissa Shields, of course, it's been reported that she's currently training to be an MMA fighter. She wants to be a champion in mixed martial arts. She is set to make her MMA debut in the summer of 2021. Now, one MMA fighter who will be joining the broadcast team for the Friday main event will be UFC star Holly Holm. A statement was released from the event officials, and I quote, it goes on to say that these are the top media professionals that this historic night for female boxing deserves. Holly Holm is one of the most popular female fighters in history, and she'll be lending her unique insights. Claudia Treos has given much of her life to female sports and broken down several barriers. Those are 2 women who will be working the broadcast table for the Friday all-women's boxing event. You can order the event via pay-per-view for $29.95 via Fight TV. So after their last season was cancelled, PFL is looking to make their big return in May, with new fight cards being recently released here. Now first off, we have Kayla Harrison vs Mariana Moraes coming up on a May 6th card, along with Gina Fabian vs Laura Sanchez, Larissa Pacheco against Julia Pachis, Cindy Derois against Caitlin Young, and Olena Kolinskic against Taylor Guardado. Those are the 5 women's bouts coming up on the May 6th card for PFL as they go and make their big comeback. Diana Askarova is set to make her Bellator MMA debut against Tara Graf on April 9. As first reported by MMA DNA, Diana Askarova will set to make her highly anticipated promotional debut against Tara Graf in a flyweight contest. The event will be Bellator 256. It will take place on April 9, 2021. And so I'm going to end off the podcast here with Juliana Pena, because Juliana Pena is one of my favorite fighters out there in the world because of her hustle game. And she recently did an interview, and this is what she said. She says, this is in relation to Amanda Nunes, she's been turning down a fight for me for a long time now. And so Amanda Nunes said that Jermaine Randame should replace Holly Holm. And I can see Juliana Pena versus Jermaine Randame being the fight to book, since Holly Holm is temporarily out. So Pena did not take that lightly. She goes and say that I think that her asking me to fight Randame again is comical. To me, it's clear as day. She doesn't want to fight me. She doesn't want to fight a wrestler and a grappler. She's been fighting nothing but pure strikers ever since she won the belt against Misha. The funny thing about her wanting to fight Jermaine Randame, like, you didn't ask Holly to fight one more. You didn't ask Miguel Anderson to fight one more. You didn't ask Felice Spencer to fight one more. All these girls are new to the division with 500 records. But for me, for some reason, it's always, oh, she's got to fight one more. She's got to be in the mix. I've been in the mix. I've been here. I've been fighting just as long as she has. And I think it's absolutely ridiculous that she would ask me to fight one more time again. Especially since Holly Holm pulled out. So Pena, she's calling out Nunes. And guess what? If Pena were to be matched up against Jermaine Randame and win, then Julia Pena, she's right at the doorstep. She's right at the doorstep, and we could see her fight potentially for the title maybe by the end of this year or early next year for Nunes' women's bantamweight title. So, Juliana Pena, she's excited, she's amped, she has all the confidence in the world, and you gotta respect somebody who can do that. So with that being said, I gotta bring this podcast to a close. You have been an awesome audience. All I gotta say is thank you. Thank you for tuning to the GSMC MMA podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I would like to ask you, please remember to subscribe to the show and write a nice review. That really helps us. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thank you, and have a good night.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Women's Mixed Martial Arts Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.